Do you start to feel your heart racing a little bit faster? Do you start to feel that your breath rate has increased? And if that's the case, sometimes just a simple breathing technique can be really helpful just to lower that heart rate and breath rate again. So the reason why it's important is it's really difficult to fall asleep if we've got an elevated heart rate and breath rate.
Hi EnvisionAirs, it's Nicole Nguyen here. Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. This is the podcast where we envision living our best lives by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, and community. On today's episode, we will be focusing on health, specifically how we can all start to curate our best sleep ever. And I'm super excited to have Katie Fischer, who is a holistic sleep coach for adults and families on the EnvisionAir Podcast. And she's going to help us deal with some sleep issues we all face, not only as individuals, but also as family units. Katie is confident that we can all take practical steps today to help improve our longer-term sleep health. And she's also going to be helping to answer some questions from EnvisionAir listeners who have previously submitted their questions on sleep issues that they are facing. Please be sure to follow me on my socials, particularly Instagram, as I'll be regularly letting you know about upcoming guests and topics we will be covering. And I'll be asking you to submit any related questions that you might have that you want answered by these experts. Anyway, Katie, a very warm welcome onto the EnvisionAir Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so excited that we get to do a deep dive into all things sleep.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Right. Well, for those wondering what a holistic sleep coach is, can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how you help people, and also a bit about your background and how you got into helping people with their sleep?
Yeah, sure. So I'm based in London in the UK. I grew up just outside of London, and just sort of take you back, I guess, to the kind of the origins and my pathway into being a sleep coach. So my parents were very routined. They were very conscious of nutrition. I was that kid with a little bag of nuts in my lunchbox, when my friends had crisps and chocolate. I was very active and sporty. I competed at national trampolining for a number of years, and I was going off at weekends and doing competitions regularly. So, sort of being active, healthy living was a big part of my upbringing. It's definitely informed who I am today as an adult and a mother and a sleep coach supporting others. I went to university in London and actually became quite unwell in my early 20s. I was really struggling with fatigue. I was sleeping a lot in the day, and unsurprisingly, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and then a few years later, diagnosed with celiac disease. Both of these are autoimmune conditions, and they love to bunch together. And I did get them under control with medication and a gluten-free diet, but fatigue is something that's kind of plagued me kind of on and off throughout my life, really. As you know, I think my first career was as a primary school teacher. I found myself in a inner city London academy, teaching children from really difficult backgrounds. It was very demanding, very stressful, long hours, quite grueling, really. But I did feel that I'd found my calling until I became pregnant with my first son, who's now just over 11. And I just couldn't see how I could kind of devote that time to the children in the way that I needed to, and also be the mother that I wanted to be. But, I didn't want to lose that kind of education, the kind of learning that I had around child development and addressing behavioural changes. I really loved that kind of nurturing coaching pathway. And then a background to all of this, I was just becoming more conscious of how I needed to prioritize my sleep for my health. And, suddenly I was going to have this little baby, and, that was going to be influencing my sleep patterns. Pregnancy messed around with my thyroid. I became anemic. Fatigue again was a big problem for me. And I thought, this is something that I'm really fascinated in, what can I do for myself, and also what can I do to gently shape my son's sleep as he's growing. So I
Wow.
decided to retrain as a behavioural sleep specialist, and so began this wonderful career helping others, and it's now spanned, around a decade. And I started just working with infants, but this kind of quickly grew into working with preschool and school age children, and then adults as well, and a key approach really to help adults specifically with insomnia. So over the years, I've helped thousands of people get better sleep. Um, yeah, and just in terms of a sleep coach and kind of what that is, sometimes people are surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that was a job, that was a profession. What do you do? So I help clients understand their sleep need better and their sensitivities or personal vulnerabilities. It's a very individual thing. Everyone's goals are different, everyone's kind of sleep situation and that context is different too. So it's very much a sort of personalized approach rather than a sort of one size fits all. And it really isn't just about, say one behavioral approach. It's about having that kind of varied toolkit based on scientific evidence, for strategies that can help people kind of, meet their goals.
So that's that's a question that actually we have an EnvisionAir listener who's called Trina, and she's based in London, and she wanted to know how to deal with her broken sleep patterns. She tends to wake up, let's say she goes to bed around, I don't know, let's say midnight or 1 o'clock. And then after about 3 or 4 hours of sleep, she tends to just wake up and is not able to get to bed for a while, and then she'll maybe get up around 7 or 8 o'clock and just feel so exhausted. And I've identified with that as well. That's happened before. For me, it tends to happen when I'm very stressed. That's when I know I'm stressed. Is I know that I wake up around, like, if I go to bed around midnight, 4 o'clock, it's like, and then all of a sudden I'm up, and then I finally get to bed maybe around 5:30, and then 2 hours later I have to get up and I'm tired. I'm so tired. So how do we deal with that broken sleep when and then, you don't want to be tired the next day, exhausted?
So broken sleep. So we need to view it from two sides, really. The first is, can we improve the sleep quality? Can we prevent triggers for waking up in the first place? Because if we are transitioning, between sleep cycles more smoothly, and there's less opportunity for the bigger kind of awakenings, the one where it becomes a fully aware wake, then to some degree that may resolve the problem. So we're talking about things like environmental sensitivity, light, noise, temperature, getting woken to get up and go to the toilet. It's a common problem. Perhaps if you've had children, or because from middle age and beyond, it can become more problematic. So sometimes it's helpful to cap that last drink 2.5, 3 hours before bedtime, see if that helps, if that's a regular trigger for waking for you. Other things as well, reflux, indigestion. We just want to rule these things out. But sometimes once we're awake, the problem is returning to sleep, isn't it? And sometimes we get that kind of reactive wake up where we become quite aroused, the mind starts to switch on, the body becomes quite tense, and either we're, processing what's going to happen the next day, or worries in our mind, or just those annoying thoughts that sort of pop in. We just can't shut that brain down. Or sometimes the mind tends to worry about sleep itself, and you start to feel stressed about the fact that you're awake. It's a classic time is that 3-4 a.m. You look at the clock, you're thinking, oh, I've got to be up at 6:30, 7 for family or to get to work. There's suddenly this pressurized window, and the more pressure we put on it, sometimes the harder it can be. So some strategies. A simple one, easier to say than do, I think, is just don't watch the clock. It's just not helpful to see, it's 4:03 and how much time you do or don't have left to sleep. So
Yeah.
have your alarm on in the morning, but don't be tempted to check the clock. If I have to get up and go to the toilet, I don't want to see the time. I just know that it's the night. I'll go back to sleep. There's opportunity for sleep. So if you're someone that does that quite kind of repeatedly, have that alarm clock faced away, have your phone under the bed so you just can't see the time.
Yeah.
And then think about, for you, when you wake up, how does that hyperarousal present? Is it largely through bodily tension? Are you restless? Are you tossing and turning? Do you experience some of the sort of physical manifestations of a stress response? Do you start to feel your heart racing a little bit faster? Do you start to feel that your breath rate has increased? And if that's the case, sometimes just a simple breathing technique can be really helpful, just to lower that heart rate and breath rate again. So the reason why it's important is it's really difficult to fall asleep if we've got an elevated heart rate and breath rate. So we need to kind of lower that down, calm the nervous system. And sometimes if we can just calm some of those symptoms in the body, at the same time, we also get the benefit of some mental calmness, particularly if our mind has got something else to focus on. So sometimes just some simple, deep breathing. There are lots of different strategies. So, but for example, try counting an in-breath through your nose for 4 counts, hold the breath for 5 counts, elongate out of the mouth. You might purse the lips for 7 counts. So you're elongating that exhale more than the inhale. That's the really important part of it. That's the thing that's really just going to help calm everything down. You might do 10 breaths, 10 rounds of that breath. Perhaps have one hand on the upper chest, one on the lower belly, and then you can feel that transfer of breath as you're breathing in, and your lungs are expanding to their fullest, and as the air is being squeezed out, and you're contracting the rib cage as well. So it can just have a nice calming effect. So that's one thing that you can try. For some people, it's that sort of mental excitement. It's that busy brain, and it's sometimes really hard to switch it off. Sometimes you feel like, right, I've got my body nice and calm, but my mind just isn't playing. My mind just isn't playing ball. And sometimes the brain needs a little bit of extra help to shut that prefrontal cortex down, that area of the brain. It's like the boss of the brain. It's the helm, and we really need to shut that down in order to be able to relax into sleep. So I don't know if you've ever tried counting sheep. I know lots of your listeners probably have, and it just doesn't work, does it? Or kind of thinking of a particular word, it's just not enough. The mind quickly diverts back to what we don't want to be thinking about. And also at this time of night, we can find that we're much more likely to catastrophize. Things seem so much worse, don't they, at 4 o'clock in the morning than they do when we wake up. So it can be a really difficult experience emotionally to be awake at this time. So some strategies that are science-based, and I did some training with a wonderful Professor Jason Ellis. He's the director of the Northumbria Centre for Sleep Research, and he shared some brilliant thought control techniques, also called thought suppression, various names, but same principle. The idea is that we're trying to use mental power. We're trying to think about something that's all mentally consuming, but nothing that we're emotionally attached to, because that's going to increase arousal, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So simple ones: start with a number 1,000, count back in 7s. Or if you want something more word-based, choose a nice wide category. It could be animals, fruit, veg, cities or countries of the world. Start with a word, could be dog, and then the letter that it ends on, you've got to find the next word in that sequence. So the word that begins with G, so I'd be like goat, and then T, another animal, turtle, elephant,
Cute. I like that. That's so nice.
They're really simple techniques, but what you can see is we're using mental power. It's different to just thinking of something. So it occupies the mind. And essentially what we're doing is we're boring the brain to sleep. So we can do it from 2 sides, because also when we address the mind and those busy thoughts and the rumination, we also get the effect of calming some of that physical tension and the heart rate and breath rate. So we can sort of address it from either side. And you might find that you're someone that works really well with relaxation techniques. Obviously, there are loads that you can find to listen to if you want something guided. And for some people, they try too hard to relax. And actually for them, it's about tackling the mental excitement. But, we can kind of both kind of go hand in hand, essentially. But if that's not working, one of the best things to do is to stop that kind of cycle of hyperarousal in the bed, because it can be a really difficult experience, can't it? You know, we're lying in bed in the dark, our eyes are tightly squeezed shut, but we've just been awake, and it can just feel like hours are going past. And it can be such a difficult experience if that's something that's happening for you night after night, or, you know, a lot of the nights of the week. And actually over time, you can find that awake time in your sleep space can weaken the cue for sleep. It can weaken the brain sleep system in this environment. So we can sometimes just click into this cycle of behavior. We wake up, okay, here we go again. How long am I going to be awake for tonight? So one of the best practices is actually to leave that environment. So you can either go out of the bed, maybe a chair in the bedroom, or you can leave the bedroom and go and relax somewhere else. Or if you have your own bed, particularly double bed, you can divide the bed. We've got one side for sleep, one side, if you can't sleep, you can sit up. And your aim is to do something that you find relaxing. Your aim is not to force yourself to sleep. You're almost doing the opposite of saying, do you know what? I'm just not ready to sleep right now, but let's try and get myself relaxed. Let's have a little reset. So whether it's with some reading or listening to a comedy podcast, or could be some therapy colouring, or a bit of journaling, or some stretching. If you really need to, there's nothing else that's going to help you relax. It could be watching an episode of comedy, you know, on a tablet or a TV screen. And the idea is, if you start to relax, you're probably going to start to feel some of those sleepy cues again. And the biggest one really is that opportunity for the eyelids to start to get heavy. But once you've been lying in bed in the dark with your eyes closed for such a long time, you're just not going to get that physical drowsy cue back again. So if we reset, we can experience what it's like to get drowsy, to feel relaxed, have another go at getting back into bed again. And it's one of those strategies that can feel counterintuitive. You're a bit like, well, how can I sleep if I'm not in my bed? But actually what we're trying to do is strengthen that cue for sleep again in the bed by only being in the bed when we're relaxed, when we're feeling drowsy. It may not work straight away. Don't expect it to be a magic cure, but it's something that will build if you use it more regularly as a tool. But hopefully that gives, you know, some different ways to approach it, really.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I mean, the prefrontal cortex is something that's really, really interesting. I just learned about that because that is when I'm most stressed and I tend to experience the broken sleep. It's often because I'm thinking about something. Let's say I had like an argument or misunderstanding with someone like my mom or my husband or something. And and then I'm just like kind of ruminating about it. And there's nothing really you can do at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you just get stuck in those circles of thought, don't you? And they're just kind of going round and round. You're replaying conversations, things that you said, you know. It's really hard to get out of that kind of negative thought cycle, isn't it? It's just break it up and distract your brain.
But I like that. I like those techniques as well. I think it's super helpful, and I think it's definitely going to help a lot of people. Now, would your advice be different for like a night shift worker? And the reason I ask that is because you talked about this idea of like tired eyes, and I know we have a listener, Teresa, who reached out and had hoped that you might be able to give a little bit of insight. Now, just by way of background, she's a night shift worker. I think she's been doing it for, my memory serves me, about 10 years. So a long time. She really actively tries to take care of her diet and other areas of her life because she's aware that, you know, there is some literature out there that says that it's, you know, it can sometimes affect other areas of your life having that sort of lifestyle. So I know you mentioned tired eyes. I don't know whether or not night shift workers feel tired overnight or not. But anyway, do you have any advice that you can maybe give her in general about her sleep and what to do?
Yeah, I mean, every case is different because it really depends what type of shift worker you are and whether you have, I guess, phases of shift work, and then an opportunity for a more kind of regular routine and sleep schedule.
Yes, I think that's what she does. Yes, that's right.
Which is, you know, a little bit easier to manage, but some people also have their shifts, the timing of their shifts change and kind of rotate, so it's just really hard to get into any kind of regular pattern. I mean, ultimately we can't really ignore the science when it comes to all the benefits of being able to maintain a regular sleep schedule that aligns our behaviors and our body clock, you know, with cycles of light and dark. But there are definitely things that that you can do. I think, the biggest challenges really are the fact that, you need to be awake and alert when your body would normally want to sleep, when you're experiencing those drowsy cues. So that's something you have to manage so that you're able to function in your job. And then the
Yeah.
other is trying to then get the sleep that you need during the day when you're misaligned. And, it's not so easy to sleep when it's light. Our bodies are designed to sleep in the dark. We produce our melatonin when our eyes are in darkness, and that's the hormone that regulates our nighttime sleep. But it's not just biological, is it? It's also the social ramifications, I guess, of, perhaps
Mhm.
being misaligned with friends and family.
Yeah.
So some things that we can think about. I think the most important thing is that when there is opportunity for sleep, you want to make it really good quality. And we could say the same for anyone, but I think for shift workers in particular, when that opportunity is there, they want to be getting, deep, restful, nutritious sleep. So, as your listener said, being mindful of those kind of lifestyle choices that will support better sleep. But this might involve protecting your sleep environment. If you're needing to sleep during the day, it's likely to be, really, really good quality earplugs, really good quality eye mask. If you live with others, them understanding that you really don't want to be disturbed when there's an opportunity to sleep. Think about tactical napping. For lots of people who are maintaining a regular sleep schedule, there may be times when, napping is helpful, but I think for shift workers, there is going to be sleep is going to be distributed over 24 hours in a slightly different way sometimes. So it might be that you need to tactically nap before, a night shift, for example, or it might be that during a night shift, if there's a window of an opportunity for a power nap, that might be a helpful thing. But I think the thing about napping within your work shift, if it's overnight, is you want to allow time to wake up. If you sleep for too long and then suddenly you need to be, firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
that's going to be a bit more problematic. So we're probably talking about those, sort of 10, 15, 20-minute power naps, remaining in light sleep, able to wake up more refreshed, and then allowing yourself a little bit of time just to fully acclimatize within that break before you need to start working again. Being mindful of caffeine. So what we know about caffeine is that it can stay in the system for up to about 8 hours. So if you think about that window where, almost like where would the last point within your shift be where it's sensible to have caffeine? Because we know that caffeine is going to help boost alertness, but you don't want it to inhibit that opportunity for sleep at the end of your shift. Sort of working back really. Food, we're designed to digest and metabolize food during our daytime active hours. So particularly if you're someone that has periods of shift work, but then you're able to maintain a more regular schedule after that for a period where you wouldn't be eating overnight, it's really helpful to try to maintain some regularity in your eating pattern. So again, there might be a cutoff point so that you're not, getting your body used to taking on sustenance at, midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I
Right.
think it really is about trying to find as much regularity as you can, really. Another thing that sometimes can be helpful, and there is an evidence basis for this, is around banking sleep. You may find that if you've got a window before shift work, you're able to actually prioritize a bit more sleep perhaps than you would normally have if you're then
Ah.
a bit less, because we do find that on the whole, shift workers tend to get less sleep duration than those who can maintain a more regular pattern due to having more regular working hours. And I think the last thing really is having those support networks around you, whether it's family, line managers, people understanding the impact of that shift work on how you're managing your routines, your opportunity, to socialize, to eat well, to get daylight, to be outside,
Yeah.
to exercise, all those important parts of the wellness picture, as well as your sleep. And, if you're really, really struggling, I think it's so important to have that conversation. Is there anything that you can do? Or, can your line manager support you, with managing that shift work so that you can maintain optimal health and so that you can stay healthy in work? It's going to be beneficial for everyone, really.
I think that's great advice, and I hope that helps Teresa. I do have a quick follow up. I know that she does go to the gym, and if I remember, it would be she gyms after her night shift before sleeps, I think. And I wonder
Yeah.
what you think about that. Is it better for her to do it maybe before her shift, almost like or is it just about the regularity of it all around
Yeah, I mean,
anything?
it might be that for her, it's wherever she can fit it in, and it's really
Mhm,
important to have the opportunity to exercise. We know that, across all age groups and all research says that when we exercise, it helps us fall asleep faster, it increases sleep duration, and it improves the quality of our sleep.
mhm,
So we know that there's a really strong positive relationship between good sleep and exercise, and also for mental health as well. So exercise is a great anxiety reliever, and if anxiety is something that inhibits good quality sleep, again we can access that benefit through exercise. Something to be aware of though is, and it depends how vigorous the exercise is,
mhm,
but if you exercise and you heat the body up and you're increasing that heart rate and breath rate, and there isn't enough time for that body temperature to cool, and for, I guess, the stress on the body to alleviate to some degree as well, it can make it harder to
mhm,
fall asleep. So generally we would suggest you probably want to leave 3 hours or so between exercising and getting into bed. If it was something quite gentle, like just some very gentle yoga, a couple of hours might be okay.
mhm,
But yeah, I mean, I think what is important after a night shift is there is an opportunity to decompress, just like anyone wants to do before they get into bed. So even if you're thinking, I need to get into bed, quickly, I want to get to sleep. Sometimes it's better just to have a little bit of that quiet time and decompression, or time for yourself, with that, just up at that opportunity to kind of let go of the day, even though it's at a different time of day, before you get into bed. Otherwise you can find that if you're still reeling,
yeah,
and hyper aroused, that opportunity for sleep, suddenly you're not able to sleep.
yes.
So I think that kind of window for decompression is important.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Katie. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to pivot a little bit because we have another sort of more specific question from an Envisionaire.
Yeah.
Now, it's more with family and children. So you have a lot of experience with that, having two kids. But
Yeah.
so we have an Envisionaire. Her name is Stephanie. She is from Ottawa in Canada. And I think that the context is it has to do with her children, and whether or not soothing versus non-soothing with young children. And so, just by way of context, her and her husband have two children. One's 6 years old, and the other one is 2.5 years old. She
Yeah.
practiced the self-soothing methods with the eldest when he was very young. He was 1 years old when she did it for a few days, and it was really painful for her because obviously I think that idea of having to make them cry a little bit is very hard. But within a few days, he was sleeping really well on his own, and he quickly developed a really good sense of sleep awareness. So, as a toddler, he started telling his parents he was ready to go to bed, and he was okay to be left on his own, which I assume is very dreamy for most parents.
Yeah.
And then, but then when they had their second, they did not do the self soothing method with the youngest. And now she's very dependent on them. She's 2.5, and she's really not able to fall asleep. And she needs to be like in their bed now, pressed up against them, and it's creating a lot of chaos and a lot of sleepless nights for all of the parties involved. And so she has two questions. The first one is, in your experience of coaching and helping a lot of families, is there a method that is better with regards to self-soothing versus comforting young children like under twos?
Should I
Yeah,
answer that one, so I can kind
let's
of
go with that one.
keep it all in
Yeah,
mind, and then
yeah,
we can go to her second. So
perfect.
I think the important thing to be aware of is that every child is different. And every sleep challenge or problem within each family has a different context as well. And what works for one child won't necessarily work for another. I have 2 children, so I know this firsthand, but I work with lots and lots of families that will have more than one child, and they will have done something with one child that worked really well, and they try it with the next or with the third, for example, and they're just like, I don't understand what's gone wrong. We thought we had it cracked. It's not working. What's going on? And I think that there are various sort of levels to unpick. I think the first is personality. There are some children that, they have perhaps always been a little bit more compliant, they're maybe a little bit more relaxed, they find it a bit easier to emotionally regulate and calm down. And there are some children that are much more highly sensitive. They're the stronger characters. We know when they're in the room, they've got the louder voice. Sometimes they can be a little bit more contentious. They can challenge us more. They can test limits more, and push the boundaries. So for some children, you might use a strategy that involves some control crying, and there are different ways of using it. And for most parents, it can be upsetting. But for some, it might be 2 or 3 nights, and then the problem's resolved and it's done. And they think, do you know what? I really didn't want to do it. It was really horrible, but actually things are so much improved. I can kind of rationalize that for those few nights or so, it seemed worthwhile. And now I've got a child that sleeps great. But for some children, it doesn't work like that. For some children, you might use that kind of method. And actually, it just leads to a lot of crying, a lot of wakefulness, a lot of stress for everyone. And you just get this sense that, this doesn't feel right, and we're not really getting anywhere. And one of the reasons can be because you're applying a behavioural strategy to a situation that can be multifaceted. So, for example, if the problem is that your child won't go to sleep independently, perhaps they used to, but now maybe they're a toddler, they're standing up in their cot, they're signaling out to you, they want you to stay in the room. Is it just purely behavioural, or are there other things going on under the surface? So, for example, have they just started napping for too long? Or is bedtime too early? Are they just not tired enough? And if we just built their sleep pressure, would they actually be able to fall asleep much more quickly? And we would get to sort of cut out a lot of that fuss and protesting, and it would support their ability to fall asleep independently. Have they started nursery? Have their eating patterns changed? Are they suddenly now eating too late and their body's trying to digest and metabolize food, and you're also trying to get them to settle? Are there other things going on, and you're noticing that they're just much more clingy? Are they dysregulated for some reason, and they're generally unsettled? So it's understandable that they're seeking more. There can be lots and lots of reasons. So for me, the behavioral strategy that we might use to support a child with independent sleep is just one part of the jigsaw. And generally, when I'm working with families, we'll try to look at lots of kind of root causes and probably work on some other things first, and that will almost be the last thing that I do. But in terms of different strategies, there's a whole kind of range. There's the kind of extreme extinction control crying, which is really child goes into their bed or cot, you leave the room and you don't return. There's a sort of a version of that where you might support from the door, or maybe you come in and out at intervals. At the other end, we've got, a parent that is fully available, might be co-sleeping, all sorts of comfort are on the table. And then sort of between them, we've got the sort of gentler kind of supporting in the room, but working through a sort of phased approach of maybe paring down touch and comfort, increasing distance, moving more out of view, and sort of working up to coming out of the room gradually. So there's this sort of whole spectrum of different approaches. And I don't have any judgment. It's really about what's right for that family at the time. We think about things like, what's the urgency? Do you really need to get that child sleeping independently really quickly? Because perhaps it's connected to work. Perhaps you've got another child coming. Perhaps there are just really good reasons why you need something that's going to work quite quickly. Perhaps you've had just really difficult experiences, where you tried to do something, your child's got incredibly upset, and it's almost kind of set you back and more clingy. So maybe for that type of family, actually working really just slowly and gentle on smaller changes and embedding them and just gradually moving on to that independence works better. But for this family, it might be just saying, okay, well, actually, they're just different children. It's a different stage in their parenthood journey. and this isn't working for the child, but if their aim is independent sleep, there is never a kind of a point at which it's not going to work. You know, sometimes parents will say, oh, I left it too late. But I mean, I work with children of you know, school age and adults as well, so we can always do something. But I think really it would be looking at, you know, sort of where are the pressure points. Let's look at bedtime first as well. Bedtime's a really good foundation. If you've got issues with night waking, although that might be almost like the priority to resolve, I would always say, what's happening at bedtime? Because if your child relies on you in a particular way to fall asleep, you know, if they are fed, they're held, they're rocked, or you're just in the room, or you sing to them, if you know, if you hold their hand, or something specific happens that involves you, understandably, that child's probably going to wake up at night and want you to replicate the same things. We might look at building that independence at bedtime first, kind of leave the nights as they are. Maybe look at, as I said, you know, with your other listener, you know, there might be other reasons why they're waking up in the night. Maybe it's not just around comfort, you know, maybe there's something else that's triggering unsettled sleep for them. But we might just kind of focus in on bedtime first, build the parents' confidence to make that change there. And then we could look at something similar during the night. But I think probably for this family, it would be some gradual steps to change. So if they're in a first step, you know, if their child, you know, wants to be pressed up against them super close in bed, can they start to shift that? Could they sit by the child and have an arm around them, but they're not actually physically lying down next to them, and just do that as a small change, maybe 3 or 4 days, get to a point where that feels okay. Maybe they've been stroking or patting. Can they then, as the next stage, just have some light pressure on the child's body, but no rhythm with patting or rubbing? From there, can they just sit on the edge of the bed or next to the bed? So you can sort of see how you just begin to sort of pair things gradually. It will take a bit longer. Sometimes we're choosing between kind of time and tears, I think, when it comes to kind of supporting independent sleep. Hopefully that kind of gives a kind of long-winded answer to that one.
No, I love it. And well, that answered the second question, which is basically how can she start to break the cycle and start creating more independence? So you've actually answered both, which is great. And I think that's really fascinating, because the idea of starting at bedtime and then, yeah, I think that's really, really interesting, and starting to create that independence. Now, but what if like the issue is like the children in the adult's bed, in the parent's bed? So like in that situation, are you then coaxing the child back to bed, or starting in the child's bed, and then they, like in the middle of the night, they wake up and they go like coaxing them back into their bed? Is that always like the reset is in their bed, the children's bed?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are different scenarios. A typical one might be that a child falls asleep in their own bed, but at some point during the night, they hop out and come into their parents' bed, which can, for some parents, that's fine. They really don't mind. I think if you've got a nice big bed, it's less of a problem. If you haven't, and you've got a wiggly child stretching their arms out, you know, taking your space and pulling your duvet off you, it doesn't lead to particularly kind of restful night's sleep for families. But if that's the case, so again, I would be thinking, okay, well, is there a reason why they're waking up? Can we look at that? I'd look at what's happening, you know, as the child's falling asleep at bedtime. So say if the parent always stays with them in the room, then we've got to think, well, you know, they're there as they fall to sleep. When they wake up, that parent isn't there. So maybe we need to build that independence at the beginning of the night. In terms of that night waking, there are some different options. You might say, okay, well, actually, as long as I get some sleep, I don't mind if my child comes into the bed. So maybe the solution is we just get a bigger bed and we set ourselves up for comfortable co-sleeping. That might work for some families. Others might think, actually, you know what, this just isn't working. Or one parent then, you know, goes off into a different room and they're playing musical beds during the night. Sometimes the solution is you create a little floor bed for a child in your room. So saying, do you know what, if you need me in the night, that's okay, but you're not coming into my bed because there isn't enough room, but you can sleep here. So then you can choose between your bed or this bed here. And sometimes that can be a longer term solution. Sometimes that's just a transition, really, because you're also removing some of that closer physical comfort in the night by having separate sleep spaces. Another strategy is you decide this isn't working for me. I feel like we're ready. Maybe your child already falls asleep independently at bedtime, but you want to get them in their bed the whole duration. So maybe you go through a process of taking them back to bed. And I think the most important element of that is that you think about, is there a sort of sense of reward that child perceives in getting out? Because if they get out of bed, maybe they get carried back, maybe they get their hand held, or they get tucked back in, they get a kiss, they get a cuddle, they get sang to, read to. For them, they're kind of having a great time. Why would they not? So we might have to think about pairing some of those things down so that
Gotcha.
there's less benefit of getting out of bed. Maybe we increase the benefit of staying in bed by thinking about a reward system potentially for some children. And again, there are different strategies. Sometimes we're just returning the child and letting them know that we're just next door, or we'll stay a short while outside. For some children, it might be that you agree to stay in the room and then you work through some sort of stages again, over perhaps a few weeks or so that you're not needing to support them in the room during the night, just as that kind of habit changes. So it really is a sort of case by case
Yes,
solution, I guess, sort of just bearing everything in mind. And my role really is to discuss these different options with families. There's
exactly.
never just one way of doing something. I might
Yeah.
have an idea about how I think, okay, I could see this might be, the right kind of
Yeah.
pathway, but I'll always discuss that with a family. And if one thing's not working, we can try something else.
Well, and you have so many strategies and this wealth of knowledge. So I feel like Steph, if she needs anything, she can reach out directly to you. And if there's any other listeners, they
Yeah,
can just reach out directly
absolutely.
to you because you have some very good strategies that I'm sure it's going to
Thank
help
you.
a lot of parents that are like, I need my sleep. Okay, and this is one of the last questions we have from an Envisionaire listener. And maybe it's just basically wrapping up everything we talked about, but essentially, Trang, she is based in Toronto, in Canada, and she wanted to know, like, if there is there just like an easy to follow, methodical, step by step process that she can just take. If there's like an acronym or something that she can just follow and try to see if she can optimize her sleep patterns.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I can give you my top 5 simple daily habits,
Perfect.
things that anyone can do. But I will caveat that to say, if you're someone that is able to maintain a regular sleep schedule, if you're a shift worker, things are going to look a little bit different. But if we're talking about someone, with fairly typical working hours, then these are, daily habits that anyone can do. So the first one, and I've touched a little bit on this already, is, live in harmony with your circadian rhythm. One of the best things that we can do, if we can, is to get up at a regular time, each morning, kind of week to weekend. What I see a lot is that people have different sleep schedules.
Mhm.
They might have one for going into the office, they might have one for working from home, they have a completely different one over the weekend. And that's really a different time that they're waking up each day. And what it does is it can create the same type of problem that we see in jet lag, but it's actually happening every single week. So we know that having that consistency of a sleep schedule has so many benefits, cognitive, health-wise, for immune function, for mood as well. So as much as you can, just try to regulate that wake up time. And what it does is, if you're getting up around the same time, it helps regulate your bedtime as well, because you're creating that same opportunity for sleep. So you can find that you can actually just make sure that you're prioritizing enough sleep night to night. And I can't remember if we've touched on this already, but just in terms of how much sleep we need, for most adults, sort of 18 to 64 years, the recommendation is between 7 to 8 hours, but there is actually a wider range of what may be appropriate for some. So that would be six to nine, just to take account of some natural variability, across a worldwide population. So if you're thinking about, how much sleep you need and your wake up time, it helps you kind of plot your sleep schedule. So that's one thing. Another thing is just to create more contrast between day and night, and particularly between light and dark. So maximize your exposure to sunlight in the day, particularly getting a good dose in the morning. It tells your brain to make serotonin, which is our happiness hormone. It makes us feel alert and positive. It regulates our sleep phase by telling the body to stop producing the sleep hormone melatonin, and it also initiates learning and memory in the brain. Even on a gloomy day, it's still 25 times brighter than indoors. And those intermittent bursts of light count too. So, if you can't spend much time outside, can you sit by a sunny window? So thinking about just maximize light in the day, getting outside where you can, and then try to just dial down that artificial light in the evening. So we're just trying to create that contrast there. Food wise, think about leaving around 3 to 4 hours between your last meal and bedtime. So late night eating is a classic sleep inhibitor that often gets overlooked. When we eat, it reignites the metabolism. It wakes us up. It heats up the body. And actually, what we need to sleep is that lowering of core body temperature. And that's why perhaps having a hot bath or shower around an hour and a half, 2 hours before bed is great, because our body gradually cools down and it actually helps the body initiate sleep. Also, if we eat too late, this makes us more prone to indigestion and reflux, because our digestive efficiency is slower later into the evening. So late night eating, not good for sleep. Stimulants, I think it's really about gauging your personal limit. As I've said already, caffeine, we know it stays in the system up to about 8 hours. So, not everyone needs to stop drinking caffeine at midday. If you go to bed, at midnight, for example, then actually, 4 o'clock in the afternoon might be okay for you. And some of us are just more sensitive than others. I think a big one is alcohol. It's one of the top risk factors for poor sleep quality. There was a study, it found that if men have more than 2 drinks and women have more than 1 drink in a night, they can see decreased sleep quality by as much as 39%. So
Wow.
it's quite significant, way more than the impact of blue light from screens.
Yeah.
And the last area is just get moving each day. We often forget that our metabolism and our physiology, it evolved so that we can be active all day from morning to evening. But in our modern lives, we can be quite sedentary. Sometimes it's due to working patterns. But yeah, we need to remember really that our bodies are designed to move, and when we
Yes.
move more, we tend to sleep better.
That's amazing. I love that. And those are all such good key takeaways. So hopefully trying that answers your question, because I think those are all things that we can all start to implement tonight. So really, really good. Thank you, Katie.
Pleasure.
While we are on to the last segment of the podcast, I feel like we need to have you back on because it was just so good. There's so much more, I'm
There's
sure.
always so much
So
more, isn't there?
I
There are always,
know.
just different avenues and threads that
I
that you can
know.
take
I know.
discussion on.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions, but anyway, we'll have you back on. Um, so this is the EnvisionAir questionnaire. We ask guests to reflect on their past, present, and future. So we will do a little quick fire of these 3 questions. So
Sure.
looking towards your past, if you could give your 15-year-old self any advice, what would it be and why?
Good question. I haven't been asked this before.
Oh, yay.
I'm a very different person now, to being a teenager. I guess it's being patient with your personal growth and development. So my calling came, when I became a mother, really, and I think at this time of life, there's sort of being a parent, it's given me a lot of self-confidence and confidence that I didn't have when I was younger. And I would never have dreamt aged 15 that I'd be the job that I'm in. So yeah, I think, you don't have to have it all worked out. Sometimes you just find that pathway later on, and that's okay.
Love that. Amazing. And reflecting into your present moment, if you could seek advice from anyone in the world, who would it be?
Another good question. I mean, professionally, I'm immersed in a brilliant community of other sleep coaches, follow lots of sleep researchers, and try to disseminate all that amazing new information to my clients. But I think personally for me, it's the people around me. So my husband. I've got this
Aw,
wonderful friend who's a psychologist. We had our children at the same time, so our lives have been sort of interwoven for many years. But when I can, when we can on a Friday, we have we plan a little window and we go for a walk before we pick up
aw,
from school. And I really cherish this time. And it's we'll take advice from each other. We talk through our problems. So having that friend that that you can go to is for really, just sensible, empathetic
yes,
advice is such a brilliant support, really.
beautiful. Love that. That's really nice. And looking forward in your future, what's one goal you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm coming towards a bit of a turning point because I've got one son who's starting in secondary school next year. My other won't be far away, and then suddenly I'll have a bit more time because I've always worked around them. I've never really had childcare. So when I first started, I was doing consultations in the evenings. I was doing what I can when my kids napped. So as I become more independent, it will give me a little bit more freedom, really, just to purely focus on the work that I do. But I envisage probably wanting to do more to help women navigating sleep in perimenopause and menopause, because as I enter perimenopause, it's something that I'm suddenly, totally fascinated by. So
Mm.
I envisage probably that direction, I guess, more for some of the coaching that I'm doing.
Amazing. Katie. Well, we are so excited to just see how the next 5 years goes for you. And I'm sure we'll be in touch and you'll come on again. But thank you so much again for being part of the EnvisionAir podcast and sharing your amazing advice about sleep. And can you just share with us where listeners can connect with you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram. You can find me at the Family Sleep Coach. If you want to get in touch, I've got a website, www.katiefisher.sleepconsultant.co.uk. You will find my email address or contact form if you want to get in touch. I always offer clients just a free initial chat if anyone wants to sort of talk through their problems and see if they'd be interested in working together.
Amazing. Well, I just want to say thank you again for being part of the podcast. And I will put all of your information in the show notes. So everyone should definitely connect with Katie because she has so much information on sleep. So thank you again. And
Pleasure.
we're sending you lots of love. Thank you,
Oh, thank
Katie.
you. It's been great. Thanks so much for having me on.
If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.